Allan Menzies was born on April 21st, 1981 and lived in West Lothian, Scotland. Allan was said to have had a miserable childhood, and by the time high school rolled around, he was being bullied by his peers. Allan had no friends, and through my research I couldn't find much on why his childhood was so inadequate. I did find a statement from a former classmate who mentioned Allan would go hunting with his dad and took pleasure in killing wild animals with his bare hands, thus giving some insight into the mind of Allan Menzies. Allan would start to use video games and movies to occupy his time, more commonly content of violent and disturbing nature. Allan would find himself becoming desensitized to the material he was consuming and would become fascinated with the darker things in life. He would start studying killers and Nazis and find himself spending the best part of his free time fixated on these particular subjects. One day Allan came into school and showed a classmate a noose he had made, which stood out to his classmate as extremely alarming. Allan would become suicidal, and it was obvious his mental state was starting to decline with not much support around him. Allan didn't fit in, and he was an easy target to be picked on, something Allan would soon decide he would no longer stand for. Allan continued to go to school despite the ridicule he was facing for being different and having a strange personality. On this particular day, 14-year-old Allan Menzies turned up for school to be met by one of his bullies. In self-defense, Allan claimed to have driven a 9-inch hunting knife through his bully in an attempt to solve his problem. However, I found a written interview online from the victim's perspective of what happened that day. The text reads, "I had heard a week before he had a knife in school and was going about saying he wanted to stab me, but I didn't believe it. A week later, I saw him in the corridor outside the English room and he asked me to go outside for a fight, like kids do. The next thing I know, I felt a blow to my side that felt like a really hard punch. Then he was in front of me and I saw the knife coming down towards my chest. I threw up my arm and blocked it, then he ran off. I looked down and there was blood coming through my jumper. I shouted to the PE teacher, who was in the corridor, 'He's fucking stabbed me.' The blade had gone a good 2 inches through my skin and muscle. If it had gone any deeper, it would have hit one of my vital organs. I had a deep cut on my arm from the second blow." Whose story you decide to believe, it's up to you, but these were the two accounts of the story, and following the incident, Allan would be taken away and forced to serve a 3-year sentence in a juvenile detention centre. Once released from juvie, Allan's mental state didn't seem to have been improved, and locking him away for those 3 years only appeared to have done more harm than good. He would eventually return to school aged 17 and make friends with a boy called Thomas McKendrick. The two seemed to bond over their similarities, one being they were both social outcasts and didn't have other friendships outside each other. Allan and Thomas quickly became best friends and would spend their free time playing video games and watching movies. It was at this time that Thomas would introduce Allan to a movie known as Queen of the Damned, a 2002 horror romance released earlier that year starring American singer Aaliyah. Allan would really enjoy the movie and asked Thomas if they could watch it again, which Thomas agreed to. Allan became immediately obsessed with the movie, especially the main character, Akasha, played by Aaliyah. He asked Thomas if he could borrow the movie and began to watch it every single day. Later, Allan would go on to say he would watch the movie 3 to 4 times per day, and over the course of a couple months, he had watched the movie over 100 times. Queen of the Damned is a vampire movie based on the 3rd novel of the Vampire Chronicles, in which Akasha is the vampire queen. She plays a powerful, immortal vampire who is awakened from the dead by the music of Lestat, played by Stuart Townsend. The music inspires Akasha to make Lestat her king. Her power is so great, all immortal vampires must stand by her if they want to survive. Allan's obsession with the movie became very unhealthy, to the point that Allan developed hallucinations where he could see and hear Akasha talking to him. He believed by following her orders he would become a vampire, be worshipped by everyone, and be immortal in the afterlife. By the time Allan turned 18, his family realised something was off, and that he is starting to possess strange behaviour more than usual. They start to hear him shouting and screaming to the soundtracks of the film far too often, and this confirms their curiosity when Allan begins to try and convince his parents that vampires are real. His family brush this off, almost not wanting to believe his delusions and tell him vampires aren't real. Allan was losing touch with reality and appeared to be living in a fantasy world. His strange behaviour began to evolve into strange tendencies, such as bringing home ox liver and storing it in his parents' fridge. This is when Allan claimed he would start to see Akasha in his room, and she demanded he must kill someone to become a vampire. Allan Menzies was clearly unwell and was lacking the right support to help him with his delusions and fantasies, which would only grow and intensify as his mental state plummeted. On December 11th, 2002, Allan invited Thomas round to hang out at his home and requested they watch Queen of the Damned again. By this point, Thomas is sick of the movie, having watched it over and over again already, and suggests they should watch something different. Allan turns down this idea, and Thomas begins to make sarcastic remarks about the film and makes fun of the main character Akasha in what seems to be an attempt at stopping Allan obsess over the movie and watch something different for a change. Thomas's comments towards the movie and Allan's beloved Akasha send Allan into a fit of rage, and he is very upset with the things Thomas is saying. Allan claims this is where he tells Thomas to go home and that he doesn't want to see him again. A few days go by, Thomas doesn't return home that night and no one has seen him for weeks. When asked, Allan says he doesn't know what happened to him. Thomas's parents begin to worry about his safety and call police, explaining Thomas has gone missing and he was last seen at Allan's house and that Allan was one of Thomas's only friends. The police turn up at Allan's house but don't get a sense he has anything to hide, so they leave. Allan did tell police him and Thomas had a verbal fight, but explains Thomas left and he doesn't know what happened or where he went after that. The police believe Allan and leave. At this point the police were struggling and they classified Thomas's disappearance as a missing persons case. This is where the story begins to unfold and questions start being asked. Allan's dad would enter Allan's bedroom one day and notice blood on his bedroom floor. When confronted, Allan says he cut himself and it's his blood that is on the floor. Allan's dad is suspicious, but he believes his son. But shortly after, this is where everyone really starts to raise their eyebrows. Allan would go to the local store and there he would see Thomas's mother shopping. He would then approach her with a bottle of bleach and asked if the certain brand of bleach he had would remove bloodstains. She immediately reports this to the police, and police now strongly suspect Allan as having a role to play in Thomas's disappearance. Police look through Allan's history and see his past is troubled, which only gives them more to go off moving forward. They return to Allan's home, but he still doesn't give away anything, pretty much just what he had already told them, that he doesn't know anything and he doesn't know where Thomas went after that night. Police decide to search the surrounding area, and in the woods next to Allan's home, they find a bloodied shirt and pants which they take for testing. The DNA results would show the blood was Thomas's blood, and Allan is now number one suspect, as the evidence was really starting to build up heavily against him. The only issue that remained was that police can't find Thomas, and Allan doesn't admit anything, even with the evidence of the clothes. The very next day, Allan overdosed on drugs and ends up in the hospital. This just added to the suspicion, as a suicide attempt just one day after the police visited his home and had him as their number one suspect is too coincidental, as well as the other mounting evidence. It would take police 5 weeks after Thomas had gone missing to find a lead, and that lead was a shallow grave near where Allan lived. In the grave lay a young man who fit the description of Thomas, and testing soon confirmed that it was Thomas McKendrick. The testing showed that Thomas had been stabbed over 40 times and his head had been bashed in. Police follow this up by arresting Allan for the murder of Thomas. As soon as police bring Allan into custody, he starts talking and tells them he had visions about vampires, and that Akasha from the movie Queen of the Damned visited him and said he had to kill somebody to become a vampire. The police of West Lothian have never faced a case like this before. Allan opens up more to police and tells them Thomas came over December 11th, 2002, and he had pressured Thomas to watch the film with him. Thomas went along with it begrudgingly. This is where Thomas starts mocking the film. The final blow was when Thomas said, "Do you really believe in vampires?" Allan demands Thomas get out of his house, and as Thomas is leaving, Allan says he hallucinates and Akasha visits him, telling him she can't believe he let Thomas mock her and that it's time to kill. Allan would then run to the kitchen and grab a knife. He goes for Thomas and starts stabbing him in the face, shoulders and neck repeatedly, but doesn't leave him fatally wounded, as Thomas would get up and run up the stairs to Allan's room. Allan chases him up the stairs and fights against Thomas's attempts at keeping the bedroom door shut. Eventually, Allan would force his way through, picks up a nearby hammer, and bashes Thomas in the skull over and over again until he is no longer conscious. After the deed was done, Allan says Akasha was happy with his kill. He said to police Thomas made fun of his bird, meaning his lovebird Akasha, and that was his justification. If you thought that was it, you'd be sadly mistaken, as Allan then spills about further details on what he'd done to Thomas that he hasn't mentioned up until that point. He described how he positioned the body on its side and made an incision in the neck, placing a cup beneath and collecting the blood. He would then drink 2 cups of Thomas's blood. He then removed the tissue from the skull and ate that as well. When Allan was satisfied, he stuffed Thomas in a wheelbarrow and headed toward the woods and buried him in a shallow grave. He returned home and cleaned the blood. He misses some, the blood that his dad would later pull Allan up about. This confession seals the conviction, and Allan would plead not guilty by insanity. When taken to court, he even said, "I may be given 20 or 25 years, but I got his soul." The jury decides that Allan is in fact not insane and sentences him to life in prison. Allan showed no remorse, and in letters home he would even sign them "Vamp" and states he'd kill again. Allan would spend the next year of his life in HMP Shotts near Glasgow, before being discovered at 7:50 AM on Monday, November 15th, 2004 in Cell 5 Segregation Unit, where he was detained in legal custody. Allan had taken his own life with a bedsheet that was suspended from a metal frame on the outside of the window. This is not only one of the worst stories to come out of West Lothian, Scotland, but also a story that hasn't been spoke about all that much since its occurrence. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and tell me what you think of Allan Menzies, the man who was persuaded into killing his best friend by a fictional character in a vampire movie, and subscribe if you like these type of videos. I upload every Saturday and cover all things crime and horror. I cover these type of topics every other week and do true horror narrations every week in between. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.